The rope tightens before the square grows silent. Merga Bien stumbles forward, her breath already broken, her wrists pulled upward by soldiers who do not look at her face. The fabric across her stomach strains with each forced step. Her body moves slower than the hands that control it. The cobblestones beneath her shoes are wet from the morning mist, slick and uneven, pressing cold through thin soles. Behind her, the heavy doors of Fulda's court stand open, dark as a mouth that has finished speaking. The executioner waits ahead. He does not shift his weight. The sword in his hand hangs downward, its edge clean, its surface reflecting a pale strip of dawn. It is longer than her arm, broader than her wrist. Designed not for battle, but for certainty. Merga Bien is with child. The swelling of her belly is not hidden beneath her dress. It rises clearly, undeniably, beneath coarse linen pulled too tight. In another season, in another year, it might have drawn quiet congratulations from neighbors. But here, in the year 1603, in the Prince-Abbot of Fulda, it is not a sign of life. It is a sign of corruption. Whispers had begun long before the arrest. A cow found dead without blood. A fever that took 2 infants in the same winter. A storm that flattened grain fields outside the city walls. Her name moved from mouth to mouth in kitchens and market stalls, carried in lowered voices. It was said in court that she had already once been accused years earlier and released for lack of proof. That memory did not fade. It waited. According to palace servants, the Prince-Abbot Balthasar von Dernbach had grown convinced that witches nested inside his territory like rock beneath floorboards, invisible until the wood collapsed. But historians agree this was not the language of theology alone. The region had suffered famine, debt, and unrest. Fear was easier to gather than grain. What cannot be disputed, however, is the number of arrests that followed. The prisons beneath Fulda filled with women first, then men, then anyone whose name had been spoken twice. Merga Bien was taken in the late hours, when doors are opened with fists, not hands. She was already carrying the child. The guards recorded it. The midwife confirmed it. The swelling could not be denied. The question was not whether she was pregnant. The question was how. Under interrogation, the rope was used before the blade. Her arms were drawn behind her back and lifted until her shoulders strained against their sockets. The body learns quickly what the mind refuses. Weight becomes an enemy. Breath becomes thin. The child inside her shifted as her muscles trembled. She did not confess at first. The records claim she named accomplices after the second elevation. Names pulled from memory or desperation. It is written that she admitted to lying with the devil, that the child in her womb was not conceived by her husband, but by something colder. Whispers spread that the unborn child moved unnaturally during her confinement, that guards claimed to see her stomach twist beneath the skin as if resisting prayer. Yet many believe this is a myth rather than documented fact, shaped later to justify what had already been decided. In reality, the court accepted the confession because it needed one. Pregnancy should have delayed execution. In many territories, the law required waiting until after birth. But here, the confession altered the condition. If the child was conceived through witchcraft, then the child itself was tainted. Mercy toward the womb could be interpreted as mercy toward corruption. The decision hardened. Some chroniclers later insisted she was granted the dignity of swift beheading because of her condition. Others recorded that the speed was intended not as mercy, but as efficiency, the square already prepared for others awaiting judgment. Only one certainty remains in the fragmented accounts. Her pregnancy did not save her. It sealed her fate. The soldiers force her to her knees now. Her breath leaves her in white bursts against the morning air. The crowd is not loud. Fulda has grown accustomed to this rhythm. Executions arrive like church bells, expected, measured, unremarkable. The executioner steps closer. His boots press against stone darkened by older stains. He places one hand at the back of her neck, not roughly, not gently. The sword rises in a controlled arc. the metal catching light once more before it disappears above her field of vision. Her fingers curl instinctively toward her abdomen, as if pressure from her hands could shield what grows inside. Her body collapses forward. The soldiers step in back to avoid the immediate spill of blood across stone. The child never draws breath. Silence follows first, then movement. The corpse is removed quickly. In Fulda, bodies do not remain long in public view. Fire waits beyond the square, outside the walls, where smoke can rise without interfering with commerce. Flesh that has been declared corrupted must not return to soil untouched. Ash does not argue. In the months that follow, the trials continue. Names multiply faster than evidence. The fear that consumed Merga Bien does not end with her execution. It spreads, tightening around neighboring villages, crossing into territories that watch Fulda with unease. Travelers carry stories to Würzburg and Bamberg, where similar storms are already forming. Some accounts exaggerate the number executed under Dernbach, others minimize it. A few suggest that the Prince-Abbot believed sincerely that he was cleansing his land. One later pamphlet describes the period as a necessary purification. Another, written decades after, calls it a fever that mistook suspicion for proof. Rumors persisted that the site of her execution bore misfortune. Market stalls erected too close to the place reportedly suffered collapse. A child who played there broke his leg in a sudden fall. Yet city records show no unusual accidents beyond ordinary mischance. The square continued to function as it always had, indifferent. Time does not erase the method, the rope, the elevation. The forced confession shaped by pain rather than belief. These practices did not vanish with her death. They were refined, documented, repeated. In Fulda, the machinery of accusation became smoother after each execution. Interrogators learned which joints strained fastest. Clerks learned how to phrase questions so that resistance sounded like admission. Pregnancy, once a temporary shield, became in certain cases further evidence of unnatural union. Merga Bien's name remained in trial books, ink pressed into parchment, preserved not as a mother, but as a witch. Decades later, when the great witch hunts of German lands began to subside, her case was cited quietly in discussions of excess, not publicly condemned, not fully defended, merely referenced as one of many necessary severities of an anxious age. But the image endured. A pregnant woman held upright by armed men, a sword designed for finality. A court convinced that fear was proof. The square in Fulda still stands. Stone replaced, walls repaired, names forgotten by most who pass through. Yet beneath the rhythm of trade and conversation, there lingers the memory of a morning when pregnancy was treated not as promise, but as contamination. Power had already decided. The body had only to follow. And if fear once justified the death of a mother and her unborn child in the name of cleansing, what prevents it from doing so again when belief hardens into certainty?